What's up, guys? This is Jesse DeRozier with Hydrilla Gorilla Guide Service here on Lake Guntersville, and this is week number 7 of my new series entitled What's on the Deck. We're going to be going through what lures we use this week during our guide trips out on Lake Guntersville, and what changes or adjustments that we had to make this week due to weather changes and seasonal patterns and that type of thing that have changed. As this week has progressed, we've continued to have some cooler temperatures and wind, typical fall going into winter. So the water temps have continued to drop. We've been seeing water temperatures now that are 48 to 50 degrees. So we're below that 52 degree threshold where we typically start to consider it turning into winter. That being the case, the shad that had been in the backs of the creeks as well as up on the flats, those have vacated those areas, and a lot of those fish with them. There are resident fish that will remain there throughout the winter, but the vast majority of those fish that were back there for that fall feed have now left and are relocating as the shad are migrating their way back towards the main body of water. Those shad that are in transition, a lot of them are still in the creek channel. Some have made it all the way back out to the main lake. Especially if you're on the lower end of the lake, there's shad all out on the main lake. But if you're mid-lake or up in the river, a lot of those are now in that kind of the first third of the creek. So if you're coming from the main body of water going into the creek, that first third that you would come to, that's where a lot of them have made it to as they've come out. They're close to the mouth of the creek. They are utilizing the creek channels, the creek channel bends, those more steeper bluffy style banks, whether it's even if you're in the middle of the creek channel, if there's a creek channel bend and it's got more of a vertical wall in that bend, that's where a lot of these shad are relating to. And if you can find a few key structures in those locations, you'll find where the bass are kind of sitting and waiting for these bait balls to come by, and when they do, they'll lift up and get on the bait ball, and they'll gorge themselves until they kind of fill up, and then they'll go back to these areas. So brush piles, rock piles, grass clumps or grass edges that are adjacent to these areas where those drops are taking place. If it's in the creek channel, stumps, laydowns, anything like that as well. There's fish utilizing these areas, and as I mentioned, as the shad kind of work their way out of the creeks, they're using that as like a home base to be able to set up and then go up and forage on these bait balls. When they start gorging on the bait balls, they'll remain with that bait ball until they absolutely are busting at the seams. So sometimes you may see a group that's got 2 or 3 fish on it, and you may see a group that's got 20 and 30 fish on it. For the situation where you've got a large number of fish, you can get into that competitive mentality where they're wanting to almost beat one another to the punch, so to speak, to get to a lure. And in that instance, what's been working really well is your Alabama rig. I really like one that's got blades on it, a little bit of flash. Right now I'm still throwing smaller profile lures. As we get into later winter and the colder temperatures, I may lose the blades, and I'll probably be stepping up to larger profile baits. But right now I'm still running 3, 3.5, 3.3s, anything like that, smaller profile baits. And basically in the mornings, a lot of these bait balls have been low, pushed down close to the bottom, and there may be enough space 2-3 feet underneath them for the bass to be able to work underneath them. And if that's the case, taking that, throw it out, let it hit the bottom, bump it up, and then just crawl it across the bottom up underneath that school of bait will get you the bites. Now if they're not below them, they may be on the outside edges of them, so kind of as they move around, you might see 1 or 2 and then they'll disappear. They're moving in behind the bait ball and you just can't see them if you're looking at them with live. The other instance is they may be on top of them, and if they're on top of them, you can throw the A-rig, and you can as well utilize a couple of different options. So the lures that I'm going to show you next, is all relative to where the fish are positioned at. So keep that in mind. First is going to be a jig head minnow. This is the producer Swimbaits. This is their pintail shad. I think that's called Roadkill is the color on that one. And I've got it paired with a tungsten head. And the reason for the tungsten is when you're throwing live sonar or utilizing live sonar, the tungsten is going to give you a harder return. You're going to be able to see that lure out farther, watch it drop, and be able to keep up with your bait a lot better utilizing a tungsten head versus a lead. There's several out on the market now that have tungsten core with lead around it. There's some that are straight tungsten, then some that are straight lead. Depending on how well you have your units tuned, as well as how experienced you are in working with the live sonar, depends on which ones you'll be able to utilize more proficiently. The pintail shad though has a really good rocking action as you're utilizing it, and what you're looking to do is tie a loop knot. I don't know if you can see that actually has a loop knot on it, and what that allows for it to do is as you shake it, you're wanting this bait to roll side to side, and as it rolls side to side, that loop knot is allowing for that freedom of movement. If you tie directly to it, you're going to limit the amount of roll that you're getting out of it. I mean, you might get a fraction. It's going to more so just kind of hop towards you versus have a rolling action. So make sure that you are utilizing that loop knot if you're throwing a jig head minnow. The next presentation that I've been using is a jerkbait. Now that one, again, you can see where the fish are at if you've got live. Get below the bait ball if you can, down to those fish, or if the fish are up above the bait ball, bring it above the bass, not below them. So you're not, in that instance, you're not wanting to go between the bass and the bait ball. If they're up, the bass are up top, you want to still continue to be above the bass. The bass prefer to feed up if they can. Sometimes the bait ball will press down so hard to the bottom that they just can't get directly underneath them to ambush. So in that case, they will kind of feed from the top. In that circumstance, so you've got the jig head minnow and the Alabama rig. The next is going to be a deep diving jerkbait. Now when the shad were up shallow, running the shallower jerkbait was key because the shad were thin on the surface. They might have been like a foot thick and spread out across the top. So it didn't take much to get below the shad. Now that the shad are compressing into a ball, they may be high in the water column late in the afternoon, they may be low in the water column in the morning, and being able to take a deep diving jerkbait and get down to the right depth is going to be a key factor. I would prefer to be below the bait ball if I can. In certain circumstances, they're out in 20 foot of water, that's not going to happen. But if the bait ball is 4 or 5 feet up off the bottom and they're 10-12 feet deep worth of shad, and there's 10 foot of water above it, and there's fish running at the top of the bait ball, that right there is going to be in the right depth. You're going to be hitting 8 foot or so with that jerk bait, and you're going to be right above the bass's head. So the live sonar definitely does help in, I guess, seeing exactly where the fish are and knowing what presentation to utilize, as well as being able to see how they react to it. I know it's a controversial subject as far as whether guys want to use it, don't want to use it, or whatever. I'm not here to debate that. Just telling you kind of what we've been doing and what we're seeing out there, so that you can kind of make an educated decision as far as what presentations to be using right now. That being the case, for the bait balls that are high in the water column, I've been using still an underspin. When they were in the backs of the creeks, I was utilizing a flashy swimmer, and that's one that I'll actually still be talking about today with a producer swim bait. This one it's a thinner profile, smaller profile bait, tends to sink a little bit faster and get down a little bit deeper. This I'm again working either below the bait ball or above the bait ball, but taking this and actually working it very slowly and just letting it do its thing. It's got the tail kick, it's got the blade flashing. You just want to just slow swim it through the area, and the fish will actually commit to that bait. One of the things that we've been doing with a lot of these baits has actually been adding thump gel to our lures. And with the winter clothes on that we've got now, we've got so much bundled up. Pockets are all over the place on a lot of these wintertime rain suits and things like that. It's hard to keep up with. So they actually made a lanyard where that just slides into that. You can clip it on the D-ring that's on your rain suit and be able to keep that on your side all day. But taking that and actually adding that to not even just the soft plastics, but actually even our hard baits has made a big difference this week on getting those fish to convert from just followers to actually eating the lures. We have seen early in the mornings when we first get out there throwing these baits, we're getting follower, and they're not committing. As soon as we put that on, all of a sudden it's like flipping a switch. Their attitude changes and they're willing to commit to the bait. That has made such a difference in the number of fish that we're catching. And I've been challenging myself to see in the mornings, can I get them to, you know, still commit to a bait without adding that? And yes, you can. I'm not saying that you can't. But the overall number of followers that change from followers to eaters is substantial by adding the thump gel to our lures. And I really like lures like this next one that have the ribs on the bait itself. It allows for it to kind of get down into the grooves of the lure, and it tends to hold in there really well. But this is my next one. So this one I'm throwing out and dragging on the bottom. And when I say dragging, I mean I'm crawling it very, very slowly on the bottom. If you look at the nose of that bait, the paint is wore off. So I'm throwing this out, letting it hit bottom, and crawling it across the bottom very slowly. That little 2.8 Kitech on that little 30 Jigs guppy head is an absolutely phenomenal combo this time of year. That I am, as I mentioned, getting below the bait ball. Find the bait ball, fire it out, and just crawl it underneath the bait ball. There's several fish that you'll see just on live that are literally just barely little ticks on your live scope or live sonar that are right on the bottom. When I'm seeing that, that's when I'm utilizing that, as well as the next couple of lures. The next couple lures that I'm utilizing is old school metal wintertime baits. This one I've been using for several weeks, and it continues to absolutely wreck them. I've caught a lot of good fish on this, and don't let the size fool you. It does catch big fish. Got wrapped up here, trying to get it off. This one is the Little George. For you newer school guys, it's going to be a Daracoup style bait, but just a tail spinner. And that tail spinner, the way I work it is throw it out beyond the bait ball, let it go all the way to the bottom. I'm not just reeling it, I'm hopping it. So when I say hop it, I'm not really like snapping it. I am lift and drop, lift, reel up as you're dropping, kind of picking up your slack. That one I'm lifting between 1 foot to 1.5 feet each pull and letting it fall, and they will absolutely smoke it when it begins to drop. Sometimes it's a light tick, sometimes it's a hard, very hard jarring hit, and sometimes you don't feel it at all, and just on your next lift they're just there. So that is the same exact presentation for this next lure. The only difference is how high I lift it. This is a blade bait, so the Silver Buddy style lure. Very, very thin profile, but it has a very hard, wide thump to it. So when you lift it, it's gonna go da-da-da-da, and about 3 to 4 times of feeling that thing pulse, and I'm killing it. So I'm 6 inches, 9 inches to 1 foot maybe up off the bottom and dropping this back down. Basically, you're wanting it to look like a dying shad. So keep that in mind. Dying shad, same presentation. Throw it beyond the bait ball, work it across the bottom underneath the bait. Sometimes even if there's not bait there, but I see a school of fish that's sitting on a rock pile or anything like that, or in a creek channel bend, just sitting down there kind of waiting for the bait to come by. If I find a school of fish, that's the presentations that I'm utilizing there. The third metal lure is old school jigging spoon, and this one has absolutely been beat to death, or should say ate to death. This is just an old piece of lead. This one is made by H2O, so it's Academy Sports lure, but the only clear coat that's left on it is around the eye. Every bit of the clear coat has been knocked off of this, as well as a lot of the paint. And I've added that teaser tail to it. I do like teaser tails on jigging spoons. Taking that same deal, and this one can be utilized one of two ways: working it along the bottom in short hops, or if they're up in the water column and the fish are down below the bait ball, if you've got live and you can see it, throw it out there and watch it flutter down below the bait ball, get down to where the bass are, and hop it back up, let it flutter back to the bass and hop it back up. They're again going to eat it on the drop. If you're working it below the bass, they're not going to eat it. So you've got to be above the fish, regardless whether the fish are on the bottom and you're working it up off the bottom, or if the fish are suspended, you want to be up and coming to the fish, up and coming to the fish. So that is the jigging spoon. On that, I am actually utilizing monofilament line. I'm not using fluoro. I utilize quite a bit of mono in the wintertime, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Fluoro tends to get more brittle the colder it gets, and so break-offs become a little bit easier. The other factor is if you go out early in the morning or cold days and you've got ice that's forming in your eyelets, fluorocarbon will cut as it's sliding across that ice a lot easier than mono will. So a lot of these wintertime rods, I keep them rigged up actually with monofilament. The other factor is not only does the fluorocarbon get stiffer, but also does the mono. So your mono, when it tightens up, it loses some of its stretch. So in the summertime, mono's got a lot of stretch in comparison to fluoro. Well, in the wintertime, the stretch on that mono now is closer to what the fluorocarbon actually is the rest of the year. So you're still basically getting the same sensitivity in the wintertime off of mono as what you normally get fluoro the rest of the year. So it doesn't make any difference to me to make that change. But I like the benefits of utilizing the mono at this time of year. The last presentation is one where I'm wanting sound, not just the vibration. So that blade bait is going to give you that vibration. The only other presentation, same deal. Throw this one out beyond the school, working it off the bottom. So working it the same way as the Silver Buddy style bait is going to be an LV 500 by Lucky Craft. Taking that, and it doesn't matter for me the color, it's just more so anything in a shad pattern, but taking that and working it up off the bottom. This has tungsten rattles in it, and those tungsten rattles actually have a different sound to the lure, and that I believe is the reason why that works better than any other lipless trying that technique. As well as the design of the lure. It's kind of longer on the back half with a short rounded front end, and it has more of the profile of what the blade bait does. The only difference is you're getting sound with it. The blade bait, I typically am either throwing silver or a painted side bait. The silver I'm going to throw on sunny days. The painted I'm going to throw on cloudy or low light conditions, early in the morning, later in the evening type deal. So that's got primarily your winter pattern covered for the guys that are fishing, say 12 feet out to the deep as winter progresses. Now for the guys that love shallow water like me, because I am a shallow water guide preferably, I will continue to do those to keep my clients on fish through the winter time. But if I can fish shallow, I prefer to fish shallow. And for those techniques, I am looking for reaction type bites, same as you would in the springtime. And so the lures remain very, very similar to your springtime lures. that being the case, is going to be a red lipless. What I'm looking for here is in those flats and the backs of the creeks and areas like that, I'm looking for the fish that are resident fish that have not left. Those grass flats will always have fish that remain, and what happens is they're not just all over the flat. They're going to be in a couple key features of that flat or the creek area. They're looking for clumps of grass, thicker clumps of grass. So hydrilla, milfoil, coontail, and sago pondweed. Those types of grass are bushier style grass, and if they can utilize that, the sun will warm up those clumps because they're closer to the surface. It'll heat that clump and it'll kind of radiate down, and so they'll utilize that one for cover to ambush from, as well as for the warmth that it will provide. That being the first piece of the puzzle, but you want to find that adjacent to some of these other key features is going to be a grass edge, a depression, or a drain or a ditch. So if you've got a little creek channel that kind of runs through that flat, and it's, you know, say 4 or 5 foot on the flat and 6, 7, 8 foot in the ditch, they're going to be relating to that area where your grass is adjacent to that break. And that clumpy grass is going to be a key feature. The other is hard bottom. They like to feed on anything that is a hard surface. So shell bars actually become a very good structure as well this time of year. So if you've got a point that comes out and it's got a shell bar on the end of it, and you've got grass clumps adjacent to it, there you go. You've got the right makings for where these fish are going to be setting up at. So getting that into the grass and ripping it out just like you do in the springtime, you're looking for a reaction strike. The wintertime, a lot of these shallow grass fish, they're hard to get a feed response. So you're better off doing a reaction type technique. The second to that is going to be a chatterbait. Now I will upgrade my chatterbait. I'm throwing a 3/4 ounce, and the reason for that is I can slow it down, get down a little bit deeper, but when I'm running it slow, that blade with that heavier head, I can feel that blade reacting against that head because it doesn't move as easily at a slower speed. So it allows for me to reach the depth where that remaining grass line is at. And even an eel grass line is still a good feature, an outside edge of that eel grass, and being able to take that, if you've got something, whether it's a creek channel bend, a depression, a hole in the grass, anything like that, taking that and working it around those key features is going to be another way to get that reaction strike. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get it in the grass and pop it out. And when it kind of stalls for that momentary stall, that's when they're going to eat it. They're down up and underneath this grass. They're utilizing that grass for cover. And if you just go running by over the top of their head, the pulses that come off of the vibration from a lipless or a chatterbait don't tend to make it through that grass. They'll go down to that grass and stop. It's going to hit that grass, and it's just going to kind of kill the pulse off of that lure. In order for that fish to feel it, if he's down below that grass clump and he's sitting down here, if you physically make contact with that and you shake that bush or clump of grass that he's in, now he's coming out looking for what just disturbed his home. So that's the reaction strike 101. Get in there, actually make contact. A feed response type bait is going to be something more along the lines of the producer swim baits that I've been throwing up on the flats. Same deal. I'll still tick the grass if I can. I might have to go to a heavier head. I've been throwing the 1/4 ounce, but I may have to go to a heavier head as we get into the grass dying back more and more and it being deeper and deeper. But also as we get through fall, which now we're basically through fall, going into winter, and the deeper that we get into winter, I'll start going up in size. I'll go to a 4-inch and then to a 5-inch. And by spring, I'll be throwing, a 5, 5.5, 6-inch swim baits. as the fish are getting ready to go into the spawn. So starting out in the fall, always small and progressively getting bigger as the water temperature gets colder. But this one is going to be more of a feed response unless you're contacting the grass. This is going to be more like a late in the afternoon type deal. The shad are primarily have kind of left the area, so this isn't, you know, something that they're seeing a lot of. And when they are seeing it, it's later in the day when the sun has kind of warmed that upper layer of the water column. You'll get some of the bait that will lift towards the surface, and so they're physically looking up, you know, for things moving around closer to the surface. That's when I'm going to be utilizing that. I'm probably not going to be using this early in the morning at all. That'll be a later in the day. So early in the morning, I'm going to be utilizing more of the trap and the chatterbait. Now, this coming week, the next 2 days, they're showing temperatures around 50, 55 degrees. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Yeah, low 50s for the next 2 days. And then the following 2 days, supposed to warm up a little bit more. After that, we've got another big cold front coming in toward the tail end of the week. So as that gets here, things are going to change. So the next couple of days, we're going to continue to see probably more and more activity. Bait balls probably being closer to the surface, as you know, we've got these warmer temperatures. When we get that cold front hit, the bait balls are going to push back down, and the fish are going to go with them. So keep that in mind as your weather changes throughout the week, that the location of the fish is going to change as well. Just keep an eye on what the weather is forecasting. The colder the temperatures, typically the closer to the bottom the fish are going to relate for me. For the grass fish, definitely more reaction than feeding if you're going to get bit up in the shallows. So I'm going to be throwing a lot more up in the shallows of that red lipless and the chatterbait and type stuff that I'm, you know, getting in and kind of ripping through the grass. But hopefully that helps you guys going into this coming week. And these patterns aren't going to change much. I mean, we're settling into wintertime now. What you're seeing on the deck now is primarily going to carry me all the way through probably to the 1st of February before you're going to really see a lot of changes. What you're going to see now is more so tweaks being in color, size, profiles, things like that, more than anything. You're not going to see major technique changes. You know, whereas we were earlier in the fall, we were punching and frogging and throwing top waters. You know, those are all techniques now that are gone. And so what we're seeing right now on the deck is going to be settled in, and primarily here throughout all of winter and into the first part of spring. But that's it for this week, guys. I hope that helps you out, and I hope to see you guys out on the water. And until next week, tight lines.